Hey guys, we're back with the sheath. I did go ahead and dye it, and I burnished the edges that needed to be burnished around the what's going to turn into the belt loop across the top. And the rest is not done because, well, it's going to have to be done later. But I dyed the inside. The inside I did put some oil on it. And before I'm done, I'll put another coat on the inside before we stitch it up. But we need to put our bend in here, and to do that, we need to soften up the leather a little bit. So I got my trusty bucket, and I just got a little rag, and I've decided that this is where I want my bend. I'll be able to stitch it down. There's enough room to let a belt through. So this area, I'm just gonna try to soak both sides really good. Now the dye is trying to prevent some water from seeping in, but if we leave it long enough, it'll get in there. And we want a pretty tight bend in here. So we're pretty wet. It's pretty pliable right now, a lot more pliable than anywhere else on the sheath is. So I'm going to keep my edges lined up here at the top. As much as I can. And we're going to squeeze that down good. I know we've got a nice bend there. So as long as I'm doing this process, I'm going to put my initial bend right down the center of the sheath as well. Get my rag wet again. Just because this is easier to do now, to start the bend, than it's going to be later. You can work it back and forth a little bit. You can feel that it's softening up pretty good. So I'm going to want this bend just like this. And I'm just going to squeeze it down good with my hands. And keep in mind, this is just the initial bend. The next time, once we soak it, the bend will be able to move. Let me get a little more wet here. And I'm just going to use an oil finish on this sheath as well, so it's not going to have that shiny appearance, you know, like this has a gloss to it. This isn't going to have that kind of shine to it, but that's kind of what I'm after. The oil finish, I think, is going to hold up better to the elements. I mean, this is for, you know, kind of a bushcraft deal. So we've got this bent. We've got our initial bend in the sheath. I'm going to take a couple of my handy dandy clamps just to hold everything in place. After that, grab a couple scraps of leather. Some thinner stuff. This is just so that my clamps don't leave marks. That's a long piece. That should do for there. And I'll just wrap around here a bit. We'll put a couple of clamps here. So we're going to leave it sit like that overnight. And I'll come back in the morning and we'll make our welt. Haven't decided if I'm going to put a ferro rod loop on here. I may or may not. Don't know yet. We'll see when we get that far. But we'll got to make a welt for it, and the welt is there to protect the stitching. Another clamp down here, I think. The welt will protect the stitching from the sharp edge of the knife, so we'll get that in there. Excuse me. It's kind of dry down here today. And we'll get back tomorrow. So stay safe and God bless. Hey guys, Mr. Tolly is back. I've got the sheath out of the clamps and such. I need to sew down the back. But I need to keep in mind that I need to leave enough room here. And the area that I skived comes to about here, which will leave plenty of area for a belt. So I'm going to put 3 rows. And for doing that, I'm going to have to take our bend out a little bit. Okay. And I will need to put 3 rows of holes. And they'll be spaced about as far apart as the teeth. Let's see if I can make sure I got this in the camera. Make sure I got it spaced about as far as those teeth are apart. So I'm going to start on the bottom. My first row is going to be really close to the bottom. Sorry about that. Make sure I'm back in there. Yep, that's okay, I guess. I'm just marking these so I know where to go. And we'll mark these 3 and I'll show you where they're going to be. Hopefully that'll, I got a feeling my lighting ain't any better this way. As you can see the 3 rows, and that's how I'm going to stitch it down. I'm going to go ahead and punch the holes. We'll have to slide that over just a little bit so I get enough room to stitch along the side here. But that's not a big deal. I'm going to get the holes punched and I'll be back after I get this stitched down. I will use some contact cement. I'll mark around the edge here. I'll do that right now. So I'm going to position it so I have enough stitching room here. That camera moved again. So I've got enough room to stitch over here. I'm going to take my awl and I'm going to take a pretty sharp angle so that my mark is covered. And it just leaves a light mark just so I know where to score. And I'll score that a little. I'll put some contact cement in there and then I'll cement this down and then I'll punch the holes and stitch them, and I'll be back when I'm done with that.